The way to find zeros of a quadratic polynomial is really to look at where, if you're looking at the graph, if you have the graph available to you, where the function crosses the x-axis. So in this case, the function crosses the x-axis at x equals 2 and x equals 4. So our zeros are at 2 and 4. Now notice the intersecting coordinates are the coordinates where we have these zeros, and it's always going to be some x-coordinate and 0 is the y-coordinate because it's on the x-axis, and every point on the x-axis has a y-coordinate of 0. So we know that the coordinates, if the zeros are 2 and 4, the intersecting coordinates are 2, 0 and 4, 0, as you see up here. So if you can find the points on the function where y equals 0, then you have the zeros. That's where the term 0 comes from. So if you have this function up here, x squared minus 6x plus 8 equals y, if you set y to 0, what is x? So when you solve quadratic equations, the solution you're getting, those are the zeros. When you set it equal to 0 and solve for x, those are the zeros of the quadratic equation. That is the quadratic solution. So you can do it a couple ways. You can look at the graph and say, okay, it intersects at 2 and it intersects at 4. Our zeros are 2 and 4. Or you can find the intersecting coordinates by setting y equal to 0. And if there are two intersecting points on the x-axis, you're going to find two zeros. So if you come out, sometimes you solve a quadratic equation and you get one possible value for x, or maybe, imaginary or whatever it might be, then there's one intersection or no intersections. You can look at the graph and say, here are the intersecting points, or you can set y equals to 0. If y equals x squared minus 6x plus 8, set y equal to 0, solve for x, you're going to get x equals 2 or x equals 4. Both satisfy the solution, and those are your zeros. And you can play around with this tool over here, pick different quadratic equations to work with, different formulas to see. Actually, over here, before I did that, there is no intersection with the x-axis. Therefore, there are no zeros. Now, if this function came down and this vertex kind of bounced off this x-axis, then there's only one zero. But if we have, what we had before, now this would be hard to look at on the graph and say, okay, yeah, that's what I see. So in this case, it might be easier to say, let's set y equal to 0 and see what we get. But hopefully you don't get a question this difficult on an exam. But essentially, you look at the graph, see where it intersects the x-axis, or set y equal to 0 and look for the zeros. And that's how you find the zeros of the quadratic polynomial.